You're listening to the Integrative Health Simplified podcast with Carrie Cootie, pharmacist turned integrative health practitioner. Here we talk all things straightforward and honest when it comes to holistic health and simplifying your best steps forward while eliminating all the gimmicks and confusion. Leave the overwhelm at the door and get ready for impactful action steps that get to the real root of your issue and actually move the needle in your health. Let's dive into the show. Hello, and welcome back to the Integrative Health Simplified podcast. My name's Carrie. I'm your host. We are still in a series titled Women's Health, Fact or Fiction. And this is a really important topic to me today because it's a really big part of my story, specifically when it comes to fertility, to having kids. This episode is all about birth control and just learning a little bit more about what birth control is, the things that it might affect that we're not really told. And that's kind of why I put, are you really giving your informed consent? Because I think some of these things that I'm going to mention, you might know, some you might not. But whenever we take something for a long period of time, like birth control, I think it's really important to understand what it's doing. And I don't think we're often given all the information up front. I know that I wasn't, and I'll share a little bit more about my story toward the end of this. And just my hope in sharing this information is not to make anybody feel bad, shame anybody for their decisions, nothing like that. You are free to make your own decisions. However, I do want you to be informed. And so that's really what the purpose of this episode is for. So let's start off with what is birth control and why is it typically prescribed? So first off, we know that hormones, as women, we know that hormones, like they run the show a lot of times. And estrogen is one of the main ones as a very important hormone. But sometimes we don't often hear about another super important hormone that balances estrogen out, and that is progesterone. So whenever we ovulate, we make progesterone. That's really the only way in time we make progesterone. And it is our feel-good hormone, right? It helps. It's like our chill. It's our feel-good, our chill, and so you're thinking, yeah, I need more of that. Yes, you probably do. Most of us do. And so not having enough progesterone is actually one of the driving factors of like PMS and endometriosis and PCOS. A lot of the hormonal issues that we hear a lot about. And it typically goes back to the fact that so many of us are not ovulating. We're not producing that progesterone to balance out the estrogen. But then comes endocrine disruptors that kind of mimic estrogen in our body and can really throw off the balance even more. And so you can see how when we already don't have enough progesterone, and then we also have the endocrine disruptors that are mimicking estrogen and making that level higher, you can see how it gets really, really out of whack. And oftentimes that is one of the root issues of PMS, endometriosis, those types of things. And so a lot of times, the reason why birth control is prescribed other than preventing you getting pregnant is because they want to help you with hormonal balance. And so you still have this root issue of why your hormones are off. And then, I should back up just a little bit and say, sometimes they give a birth control for like skin issues, like acne. So it's typically one of the three of those. And so I think that we have to consider, okay, you have these issues already at place, like if you have hormonal imbalance or skin issues or whatever, and then you go on birth control to fix it, I'm putting that in quotation marks, fix it, you still have these root issues that are now just covered up. Like they're not necessarily fixed, even though you might feel different, they're still there, they're just covered up. And so that's just kind of like laying the groundwork. So I also think that it's important to understand why was birth control created and what was the purpose of it? So whenever it came out around 1950, that kind of time frame, the contraception was illegal. And so they had to figure out a way to prescribe it to women that was legal. And so fixing women's hormonal issues was the way that they kind of got around that. They skirted around that issue. And so when you're on the pill and you take the birth control pill, it looks like things have, like your cycle is now regulated. Maybe it was erratic. Maybe there was, a lot of issues surrounding your cycle. And now it looks like from the outside, maybe from the symptoms that you're not experiencing and the way that you feel different, that things have been regulated. But you have to also remember that all birth control are synthetic hormones, a mixture. There's so many different types of birth control that have different mixtures of different synthetic hormones, but that's what it is. And so whenever you take this influx of synthetic hormones, the natural cycle of hormones ceases because now you have this influx of synthetic hormones. So your body's like, okay, I don't necessarily need to produce any of my own, which stops you from ovulating altogether. So that's obviously one of the reasons why people take birth control is because they don't want to ovulate because they think that obviously if they don't ovulate, they're not going to get pregnant, which is true. But there are definitely other ways that you can, if you're ovulating, not get pregnant. But that's maybe another episode topic. However, sometimes people think that's their only option if they don't want to get pregnant right now is to take birth control. But that's typically that's what it does. It's synthetic hormones and it ceases the natural cycle of your hormones. And it just stops you from ovulating altogether, which then of course you're not necessarily getting that benefit of the natural progesterone, which is the chill, that really comforting hormone that you would typically get if you ovulate. You're not getting that anymore. And so some people don't really realize all that's going on because you're still getting this regular, like you're getting the 28-day cycle, 3 weeks of non-bleeding, 1 week of bleeding, and then you start all the way over. So people think they're still having, a regular, I'm putting that in quotation marks, a regular cycle. But what's really happening is you're getting you had all these synthetic hormones, and then when you stop taking them after week 3, you're getting a sudden drop in those. And that just induces a uterine shedding, uterine lining shedding, which is a bleed. And so it's kind of like a false bleed. It's not necessarily a regular cycle. It just seems like that because that's the way it was designed. And so that's kind of what all is going on underneath the surface that you might not realize when you are taking birth control. And so let's talk a little bit about some of the things that it affects. So number one, it affects your minerals severely. It definitely creates mineral deficiencies. The main ones I would say are B vitamins, zinc and selenium, vitamin C, and vitamin E. And as you heard me talk about on previous episodes, or if you follow me for a while, like minerals are super important in like a much bigger picture. I know you can zoom into different areas of the health and see how minerals affect those areas. However, overall, like from just daily processes that we need, that those are the ways that our body has energy and has what it needs. It's kind of like fuel for those enzymatic processes. And so this can throw off a ton of different things, having these mineral deficiencies. And so that is one key thing that birth control affects. And a lot of times people come off birth control, they are super depleted in a lot of different minerals, but these that I mentioned are some of the main ones. And so another thing that birth control affects is your thyroid. So progesterone and your thyroid work very closely together. So once you ovulate and you produce that progesterone, your thyroid is actually stimulated and it increases your body temperature. So that's one way actually that people can track ovulation is taking their body temperature upon waking every morning and seeing when there's a spike. And so it's really crazy how all of this works together. But if you think about knowing that information and then the fact that whenever you don't have that progesterone, your thyroid isn't stimulated, a lot of times people can develop hypothyroidism, which is an underactive thyroid over time because of this. And so your thyroid and the suppression of it is definitely something that can happen when you are on birth control. Another thing is it can affect, your immune system, or it can exacerbate autoimmune issues. And so progesterone is super important for like anti-inflammatory things and processes in your body. And so if you aren't making your own progesterone or estrogen for that matter, this can kind of almost like push you over the edge if you already have some of these issues brewing, or if it maybe runs in your family, there might be a genetic component to that. So that does play a part. Birth control does play a part in the autoimmune issue. realm. And so I think that's important to just have this knowledge of, if you are taking this or if you're considering taking birth control, like these are the things that you need to be thinking about are actually going on in your body. Another thing to consider is that I think that sometimes we think we can just shut off and turn on fertility like a light switch. And that's just not the case. And this is where my story comes in. So I actually took birth control for about 10 years. And, then, of course, I stopped taking it, and me and my husband wanted to start a family, and I just thought it was going to happen like I just said, a light switch, I just stopped taking it 1 month, and then I'm pregnant the next, and that did not happen. So after a few months, I was just super discouraged and really just frustrated because the Lord had a plan in all this, but I'm such a planner, and I just was like, why is this not going like I want it to go? Right. And so there was a lot of things that the Lord wanted to show me during that time, and that thankfully He did show me. And I'm so thankful for that time, which ended up being about 2 years that it took for us to conceive. I am thankful for that time because it did teach me a lot, and I did grow my faith, which I'm just so thankful for. But it also taught me, and I learned a lot about the things that I'm sharing with you now about birth control that I did not know, or else I would certainly not have been on it for as long as I was on it. So sometimes you learn these things in retrospect. So if you are more at the beginning of that journey, I hope that now you have this information so that you can make an informed decision for you, what's best for you right now. But this is something that is different for everybody, and everybody doesn't have the story that I have. But it is certainly something that is very common to have a period of adjustment after you get off birth control, before you can conceive. I mean, some people go back to having regular cycles and some people don't. So it's just, it is very individualized. However, I think sometimes we really think that it is like a light switch, but that's not how our body works. And just like I talked about in previous episodes, our bodies, as women's bodies are always looking to feel in abundance and feel, cared for and taken care of. And so this is one way that can throw that off, and our body doesn't feel in balance, and we do feel like it, and it can make it feel like it's in a depleted state, which definitely can affect fertility, and it can affect all the things that I've mentioned, thyroid and autoimmunity and all those things. And so I think this is just hopefully enlightening and something just to consider for yourself, or maybe you have a teenage daughter or a young adult daughter that is considering birth control for whatever reason. I just think these things are important to know, and I wish that the little pamphlet that came with medications talked more about this. But that's a different agenda that pharmaceutical companies have. And so I just think it's important for us to have this information and be informed when we do make these decisions. And so one last thing is, if you do struggle with depression and or anxiety, hormonal birth control has actually scientifically been tied to that. So that's just something else to consider. If you do struggle with those things, that hormonal birth control might not be the best choice for you. And it can really be a lot harder to come off of birth control. And you might have, some of those symptoms show up, when you are coming off of something like this, because there is such a big hormonal shift that happens. So again, these are things to consider. I'm pro you understanding what's going on and making an informed decision for yourself, and not necessarily just listening to what your doctor says, even though they're so smart. They have so much training. I don't necessarily think there's ill intent there. However, I just am a big proponent of us being an advocate for our own health and understanding how our body works and how what we're going to take works with our body, or maybe not with our body in this case. So you guys let me know if you have any questions about this. Again, I'm always open to just continuing this conversation. If you want me to do a specific episode on other birth control options, that might be a really good one to do as well. So you guys are going to have to let me know. Give me some feedback. My email and my Instagram link, those are two great ways to get in contact with me. They are both in the show notes and in the description of this video, depending on how you're watching this. So thank you for being here for these conversations. I think they're just so important for us to be, again, informed about our bodies and know them better. And so we can be more of an advocate for our own health. So I will be continuing this series and this conversation in the next episode. I hope you'll join me, and I'll see you then. If this episode has served you in any way, I would love it if you'd share any aha moments or takeaways over on Instagram and tag me at Carrie Cootie. And if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button so we can continue to learn and grow together.